Hey, all, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Excellent.
Right, they can hear me. Someone speak over there in DAO land? Charles.
Yeah. Hi.
Testing, testing, testing.
Oh, lovely. Okay, wonderful. Right, so this is the community call for EVO Labs Distributed Autonomous Organization. And what you missed on YouTube was not much. I just said that I would trailer a presentation that I am going to call O-Day Semmelweis Reflex this weekend, and I'm going to drop some absolutely mind-boggling proof that has come out of existing research that was published in a major peer-reviewed journal that supports all of the things we've been discussing over the last few years. This was just going to be part of that blog introduction, trailering that, but I had a conversation with Charles earlier today, which we'll talk about later on, which has some implications for the Constitution and the DAO white paper, and this actual text will probably be part of one of those documents. And so I'll read it now for those that don't know what the Semmelweis reflex is, and if I'm saying that word wrong, I might try and correct it before the weekend. So the Semmelweis reflex is a term describing the tendency of people to reject new evidence or knowledge because it contradicts established norms, practices, or beliefs. It is named after Ignaz Semmelweis, a 19th century Hungarian physician who discovered that hand washing could drastically reduce mortality rates from puerperal fever in maternity wards.
Puerperal fever.
There we go. Thank you. There we have a doctor in the house. Thank you. Could you explain what that is for the uninitiated?
Yes, it's very common that a nasty strep bug, which is easily treated these days with penicillin, in those days would infect a very large percentage of women who'd just given birth, and they would get an intense and often lethal sepsis as a consequence.
And why were they getting infected?
Because the dirty buggers didn't wash their hands after they'd been dissecting corpses.
Yeah, and that's it. So they wanted to find out what was going on with these women dying. They would dissect them, and then they would walk straight from the dissected corpse to handling a birth.
And when Semmelweis pointed this out, they rejected him completely.
So, despite presenting clear evidence, Semmelweis colleagues and the broader medical community initially rejected his findings, illustrating a cognitive bias against new ideas. The reflex is characterized by resistance to change. There is an inherent resistance to altering long-held practices or beliefs, even when faced with compelling evidence. 2. Confirmation bias. People tend to seek out or interpret information in a way that confirms their preconceptions, ignoring or rationalizing away contradictory data. Authority and tradition. There's often a deference to existing authority or traditional methods over innovation or evidence-based practice. 4. Fear of disruption. Change can be unsettling, leading to a protective reaction against ideas that could disrupt the status quo or personal comfort. The Semmelweis reflex serves as a cautionary tale in science and medicine, emphasizing the importance of an open-minded, evidence-based approach to knowledge and practice. It underscores the need for critical thinking and the willingness to challenge and reassess established doctrines. Now, how do we avoid this? How do we avoid the Semmelweis reflex? Well, to avoid it, we should cultivate an open-minded culture that values evidence over tradition, encourages continuous learning and critical thinking within your community or organization, implement structured processes for evaluating new ideas or data, like peer review or scientific method application, foster an environment where questioning the status quo is welcomed and skepticism is balanced with curiosity. Educate on cognitive biases, promoting awareness of confirmation bias and the appeal to authority. Finally, ensure there's a mechanism for updating practices based on new evidence, making change the norm rather than an exception. It's kind of what the MFMP has been doing all along, and I hope that we can foster this, but it came out of a particular situation which we can discuss later when Charles has gone through the update. So Charles, over to you.
Right, thank you, Bob, as per usual. Okay, guys, so we are going to go over what we've been doing throughout December. Quite a lot of people were on holiday, but we actually did quite a lot of work. So if anybody has any questions, you can fire them in the chat, or wait till the end. There'll be a question and answer session, and I will try and answer as many as possible. So throughout December, we actually completed our assessment of all of our treasury features, and we've signed up to all bar one of the relevant services. Our white paper is ready for community review. Our constitution is open for community review also. We have some CVs of some new developers who will be working part-time and full-time arriving in the next couple of days to help us with the front end. We understand how incentivization will work, and we plan to enact solutions to reward community interactions. We've made the necessary connections to ensure that a legal wrapper can be formed swiftly in the case that the Marshall Islands changes regulations or costs increase too much. So tasks that are in progress currently, Chris is doing gangbusters at the moment. He's doing tremendous work creating operational support documents. He's defined support options for projects. He's looking at identifying further requirements and is writing guidance, how-to guides, a FAQ, and he's beginning to look at training and safety materials as well as CAD applications to assist with projects. We're talking to future partners to help with our needs in certain areas and to establish some synergies. We're asking every project which has signed up so far for more information so we can populate our DAO project pages so everyone can read what's going on with the individual projects. We're reinvestigating the scientific process check for onboarding new projects. This is something that we'll get to a little bit further on. I've included that in the presentation. And the legal incorporation has begun as of today. The white paper and the constitution took such a while, so that's begun today. And we have been bug hunting over the last month, and we will continue doing that with our proposal workflows. New tasks which we're looking at in January, and we'll hopefully get to these. We need to design soulbound token art, so we'll probably be coming to members of the community, trying to raid Bob's treasure trove of imagery, to see if we can create some soulbound token art. That'll be for our credential system. We need to look at how much information we need from projects and to see if there's anything we've missed. We're pretty confident we're close to it, but there might be some dotting of I's and crossing of T's to do. We'll be looking at lab space globally and talking to a few decentralized science ventures who are trying to offer decentralized lab space. Really interesting stuff. We'll begin designing a website. We'll redesign the front end to the website with 3D visuals. Again, Bob will be helping with that, and we'll be looking at the fractal toroidal moment. And we'll be looking at a modern yet functional layout with a smooth user interface and a user experience. And again, more testing. The challenges we've had this month, Gnosis, who we proposed we would host all of our soulbound tokens on, they haven't been as receptive to DeSci as a few of us would have hoped. So there are a couple of other L1/L2, well, L2s to be precise, chains which are looking for DeSci projects. So we're going to start chatting to different DeSci, different L2s to determine whether we can find a home and some extra funding. We had to rebuild our whole project management and forum system this month. Chris had to do that, and that was due to a permissions access issue. So we're now in a position to invite users with the correct access so people can actually join and look at the things we want them to look at. So our treasury, still up on the same address if anybody would like to check. As I mentioned, we've integrated all the decentralized applications that we want, bar one. The one that we haven't integrated yet is colony.io. and they have one of the most unique offerings in all of the crypto space at the moment. They're offering decentralized and community-controlled bank accounts. So we can have multiple members controlling the account. So it's a really interesting thing. So we might get the multi-signature signers who control the treasury, also control the bank account as well. So adding a further level of decentralization. Our white paper. Yeah, so when I finished the call last month, or at the end of November it was, I thought the white paper would take me 2 or 3 days to finish. It took me a month. The reason being is I had to drill down on exactly how everything is to be done. I mean, there were a lot of not necessarily unanswered questions. We just didn't know exactly how everything fit together. So hopefully when you read this version of the white paper, there was a link up in the YouTube. We'll make sure there's something in a post on bobsremotview.icu. But yeah, we've got that in an open source, decentralized, an encrypted version, and it's on chain, so nobody can delete it or anything like that. You can go and comment on it. After discussions today with Bob, I think the how is done with the white paper. We need to do more on why we're doing what we're doing, and we need to really explain our narrative. We need to tell a story. We need to articulate why we're on this collective quest together. We need to succinctly elaborate on what our end goal is and what we will do once we've achieved our end goal. So that's something that Bob and I will probably chat about over the next couple of days. And again, please feel free to log in and leave a comment on the white paper should you want to change anything or should you want to add something. The Constitution is also up. Chris and Dr. Rupert Holmes have put a heck of a lot of work into this. It's absolutely magnificent. I'd been focusing on the white paper all month and had glanced at it and obviously hadn't looked at a revised version. But when I looked at it, finally I had to look at it at the end, just after Christmas. I was just blown away about how amazing it was. So like, this is a community document, and I think it perfectly describes our mission. I think there will be a couple of other caveats or amendments we'll have to put in, but that will be something that we can discuss as a community. So yes, as mentioned, we've contacted Developer House to help us with our front end stuff. Well, we've got some amazing volunteers and they're doing tremendous work. I can't really expect people to work full time on this type of stuff. So we're going to go and find some amazing developers from the Philippines and Brazil, keep the costs low while still getting the experience quite high up. They'll be responsible for building our new front end and linking APIs together to make sure everything will be working as required with all the functionality that we need. So for incentivization, as you'll see in the white paper, our first version of incentivization, it's complete. We think actually there's still a little bit more work to do, especially after today's combos. And we need to create some user stories to describe exactly how users are rewarded. So that's something that we'll be working on over the next couple of weeks. The registering, as I mentioned, is in the Marshall Islands, began today. And this is due to our constitutional white paper being finalized. As I mentioned, the legal wrapper is completely confirmed, so we can set up a legal wrapper in 10 different jurisdictions, should we need a redundancy option swiftly. So the scientific process check, our flow is somebody comes to us and says, okay, we've got a lovely project. They maybe put an application in or have an inquiry to see if they can put an application in. We'd initially thought of like utilizing Toon, which I'm doing at the moment, and he's providing really interesting feedback, excellent oversight, amazing questions, so that I can go back to projects and be like, what's this, what's this, what's this? Some projects that I'm getting approached with for our second cohort of projects are requiring such a level of due diligence that I'm having to use Toon, Bob, Alan Smith, our developer Martin, who's amazing by the way, and Grok. And that I'm still not getting all the answers I need. So there's going to have to be an extra level of due diligence thrown in to the scientific process check, just to make sure that we're not letting in people who potentially would want to scam us. So yeah, we may need to think of a new process about how to do this in a decentralized fashion. And I think the moniker that we're looking for at the moment is trying to create a decentralized excrement detector. so that we can determine what is nonsense when it's applying to us. So over the Christmas period, things have been a bit quiet, as you'd pretty much expect. Everyone's been having fun with their families and doing lots of lovely things in the snow. Some of the devs that we've taken on board, though, have had some pretty amazing free time. So Martin and Sterling, who I think are on this call, doing an amazing job. They put together a flow, features needed, and highlighted problems for the timeline project. So they've actually been looking at how to formulate this. They've gone and forked Tupacabra's UFO timeline. So it's quite a lot, like Jeremy Reese was talking about this the other week. I think Mr. Forbes has talked about it. And Mr. Tupacabra has this wonderful visualization of his timeline, lots of different fields. And one of the challenges that we had, I mean, I visualized this would work as a single line that would then branch off. And the challenges with that is depending on how many data points that we're putting in, it can sometimes look clunky. So the way Tupacabra has done it looks much, much better. So yeah, they've done a great bit of work, Martin and Sterling. Eric has now jumped in and he is looking at his knowledge graph. So he is now working out exactly how his linear AI timeline is going to work and what funding it will need, exactly how long it will take. Lex and Sterling and others on the unofficial Discord have been amassing gigabytes of data for the timeline. So we're already collecting data. We're looking at how the data can be stored, and then we're looking about how the data can be all displayed. Further, Dr. Paul has been doing some exemplary work with his H2 EVO project, and I thought this was worth a mention because he's filled in the project application amazingly. So I thought I'd go over what Paul is looking at doing. He's looking at making water better by recirculation through ultrasound, DC-powered Marsa gas electrolyzer units, using a Nazi nozzles, recirculation through 60 kilohertz isolated E fields from a toroidal inductor, all sorts of wonderful things that he's going to be doing. So we've reached out to an R&D company who specializes in vertical farming, and we're going to try and get a full project brought together over the next month. So yeah, Paul's been doing tremendous work. And so by the end of January, fingers crossed, we shall have all the project info required for the community to be able to support inventors, to be able to understand what's going on in their day-to-day lives and how much progress they're making. So yeah, we're getting actually really excited about this type of stuff. It's really good. Amazing to see the community come together. So we thought we'd include the roadmap. So we've tried to look forward a year. And fingers crossed, we hit all these targets, or we don't need to hit some of these targets. So during Q1, we'll focus on bringing together community to test our beta with live votes and active funding, so real money. We as a community will establish and ratify our constitution and community rules. They will be key supporting documents in our LLC incorporation and act as a fallback document in case of disputes, challenges, or oversights. By Q2, bug hunting and governance testing will be in full flow. We will investigate ways how we can automate as much as possible within the DAO. The reason for this is essentially humans should be on the periphery. The DAO should operate as an automated machine, essentially, doing all the things that we need to do. So we need to look at ways of automating certain processes which humans are involved in at the moment. Things that would include the soulbound token, minting approval, application process checks, the procurement checks, looking at DAO community proposals, applying legal checks and documents, KYC and AML checks, bundling to Arweave, how we do that automatically, and basically any other process which involves a member's contribution. We want to move humans to the outside, so we're just making decisions and everything happens automatically. I think that's the best way for DAOs to be in the future. Further, we will ascertain whether we need to continue our decentralization efforts. Can we run our own self-hosted instance of Charmverse or Snapshot? Can we use an open source onboarding solution to replicate and replace Web3 Auth so that, we replace that, we don't have to worry on a third party? While it is beneficial to continue our mission to decentralize as much as we possibly can, whether we can actually do so is another matter, and whether we actually need to. We will also be sending out replication kits or schematics and plans for reproduction replication partners. Our first challenge will be Ultra. trying to get as many different labs to look at the ultra experiment with high resolution cameras, high frame rate cameras, looking at the foil or whatever's been put in there under scanning electron microscopes. So there'll be certain caveats that the replication partners will need to live up to. We'll need to know that they've got a certain amount of kit, certain amount of experience, know what they're looking at, know what they're looking for, and that they can do live streams of the experiments to show that they're following the processes that we give them. Lastly, members of the DAO will be in Japan for ICCF 26. So if anybody would like a nice sake or something like that, I'm sure there'll be flowing sake. It'll be wonderful. So Q3, we're going to bring projects the opportunity to begin an article or paper for the journal. So we're going to ask every single project that we've got on board to start looking at something that they'd like to write about. We'll source and onboard partners who focus on manufacturing and go to market, because we'll need those about Q3 probably. And we will investigate whether we need further privacy options for the DAO and the community. Let's say that we want everything to be completely private, anonymous. We can do that if we need to, but whether we need to, that's another thing. Yeah, and Q4 will also be releasing our first journal, or our first partnered journal, and our first physical journal. So that will be pretty much that. So I do appreciate everyone's time. We need from the community, if anybody's willing to start or wants to design a website. I mean, we've got Sterling and a gentleman named Ali, and they're wonderful at front end stuff. I don't know if they do design. I haven't actually asked that question. So if anybody likes designing websites, there's my email on the screen. Ping me an email. That'd be wonderful. Chris has been setting up operation manuals and looking at health and safety stuff. So if anyone's interested in helping with DAO operations, I'm sure Chris wouldn't mind a hand. He seems to have a job list longer than my arm at the moment. It seems absolutely incredible what the guy's doing. If anybody in the community knows Lie algebra and is a mathematician, like obviously you need to be a mathematician to know Lie algebra, please contact me. I've got a project which I don't understand, and I need to know what Lie algebra is, or at least some maths, which it seems pretty incomprehensible to me. And the final point I have is the website will be changing within the week to show a mirror of our white paper. So the onboarding form will no longer be there. So if you need to contact me, again, email's on the screen. If you need anything, please contact me. My email inbox is always open to everybody. I just would like to thank everybody in the community. You've all been amazing, and I look forward to taking this further with you guys. Thank you. Cool.
Thank you very much, Charles, and thank you to Chris and to everyone that's been working on the programming and back end. Thank you to Rupert as well for your contributions. Really fantastic to see this coming together. And thank you to Paul, the water guy. Should we call you the water guy now?
All right, yeah. Water maker.
Wonderful. Yeah, so has anyone got any questions at this stage before we talk about what we talked about earlier today and how we propose, and we'd like input on that, a kind of shield against the risks that we discussed earlier today. So any questions?
I was only wondering if Griffin Brock got on here. I invited him. I'm sure you guys probably invited him as well, but I haven't seen him pop up yet. Any news from Griffin? I was hoping to
well,
see him.
he turned me down twice for his. He requested that I had another call with him when he had more prepared slides to have a discussion with me. And then he cancelled twice because he's got so many orders for his tube that he has zero time at the moment.
That guy is more busy than a one-armed beaver.
Well, I think it's totally deserved, and he's probably going to have even more orders soon when I discuss what I think is going to work with that tube.
Am I right in saying that Griffin's actually the closest thing we've got to a bit of a genius, except yourself accepted, of course?
Well, I wouldn't consider my genius. It's just it's like that old phrase: the harder I work, the luckier I get. But
what about Griffin, though? I think that boy is as bright as a whip.
Griffin, his superpower is he tried, and in this field, the superpower is always you try. Most people give up before they've even started, or they give up on their first failure, and nothing that's great is ever easy. And Griffin went back to basics, and he took something where the claimant had shown a real effect. These shadow graphs, they're literally in the museum there in the former Yugoslavia. And so this is a real thing, and he decided to pursue that and see if he could recreate it and make it better. And this is something that he started when he was 16, and yeah, so like
major respect,
full on respect, and he's really studied hard. And you know, this is where essentially the DAO is asking the community to say, look, you know, these are things that real people showed real effects from, and we're asking for people to let's make these into products that can be used and benefit humanity. So yeah, I don't know when I'm going to get a call with him. I hope it's going to be soon. On that basis, I am planning to be, thank you to Karen for organising some support for me to go. I will be at Tesla Tech in August this year, and I will be talking about the implications of the Griffin-Brock electrode. That is probably what I'm going to talk about there. So
funder sitting on your funder sitting there. His name is Paul Finman.
Oh, thank you very much, Paul. Very kind of you. Do you have a face, or is it just words?
Yourself, Paul.
Do you have a face, Paul, or are you?
I have a face, but okay, I'm in my home office, okay, and I'm not presentable.
Oh, Paul, so are we all.
You're trying to tell us you're naked, right?
Right.
Okay, I don't need to see that, you know. Maybe when I come over, you know, I can see your face at the conference. But I encourage people to come there. I will also be in Japan. I'm hoping to be at the Cosmic Summit. Please wait until I've got a referral code, because that helps me. Yeah, so that's my movements that is largely established. So, not to get off track, is there any other questions before we talk about the subject of the day?
I'm just going to can I make one comment? I think your Griffin Brock, Aaron Murakami just sent out an email that he will be doing his conference.
Okay, yeah.
July 8th through 12th, and Brock is always there.
Yes. He calls them his colleagues, and so I fully expect him to be at that conference. Yes, but I would like to see him. I mean, I would like to do a specific experiment with him that I have asked him to do some preliminaries. I predict that his device will be able to force the beta decay of, so it's something like a cobalt-60 source, a beta source. And if that is the case, then I have suggested in one of my recent streams that he could replicate and extend the observations of Dr. Alexander Parkhomov, where he created a source of this radiation using an overdriven tungsten filament light bulb, and used various elements and compounds in a secondary receiver material outside of the filament light bulb. And he found that lithium fluoride produced the most heat. So if that's the case, that the radiation is equivalent. This radiation was observed as early as the 1950s with the classified boiling water reactors in the Soviet Union, deuterium palladium boiling water reactors. They saw this radiation emitted that would cause accelerated rates of change of decay in radioisotopes. If that's the case, and it does the same thing of producing excess heat in, say, lithium fluoride at a distance, because it's such a focused beam and because it's such an intense source, I would like to have an experiment that we run at ICCF 26 in Japan, where we have the tube on one side of the auditorium and we have the target LENR reactor on the other, and we see if we can switch on and off the excess heat through the people in the auditorium.
Well, could you not do that if he showed up at Tesla Tech, or if you showed up
anywhere? I'd like to do it anywhere, but the point of this is that one of the components, it would appear, of the LENR process is this expulsion of this material, that is generally wasted in Lena. And you can see a conversation between Zatelepin, Baranov, and Parkhomov in 2018, which I recorded, and they're mocking Parkhomov because of his arrangement of his reactor is wasting this strange radiation. And I think that encouraged him to do this whole series of experiments, which he's just sent me his latest paper from the last Russian conference, where he's been studying, what are the better secondary materials that are at a distance to be able to use this flux of this radiation. But I think the Brock electrode has this. If it does do this, it allows us the means by which we can remediate nuclear waste non-contact. So like you can create a whole series of these things and beam them at the nuclear waste in Fukushima at a distance and remediate the waste at a distance, or clean up land. I mean, it boggles the mind when you have a device that could accelerate decay at a distance. So yes, it could be done anywhere. I would like to see him. I will be talking about it at Tesla Tech. I've trailered that right here today. That is my intended talk. I would love to have him there to be able to demonstrate some of these other aspects. The other thing is that, in theory, this should be able to provide propulsion. So I would like to see either a pendulum or with a single device and pulsing it on and off, or and trying to get the phase in there so that it is constantly pulsing as it's sweeping down, or a rotating arm with two of them attached to it. That's going to be more complicated to set up. But if we can create that rotating arm from that, it would show that these particles do have a physical impact. You could also have it on a micro scale and have it pointing down or up, and see if you could have less weight or more weight corresponding to the direction of thrust, as it were. So there's a lot of things I'd like to do with that electrode, and it involves him not having too many orders. So please, can people stop buying his electrodes?
Right.
I don't mean that.
And Paul, do you have a comment on that? Because Paul's a nuclear physicist and works on all kinds of stuff.
Yes. Well, I'm interested in transmutation and then isomer synthesis. Okay, and that's a very important field. And then with that, you can make micronuclear reactors. So anyways, we could talk more about that, but you can transmute bismuth 209 into polonium-210, and then you can make a micro nuclear reactor with that. And that's not controversial in any way, or that's not fringe science. Okay, that's well accepted. It's just a matter of being able to do that efficiently.
Could I ask a silly question? Could you turn off a nuclear reactor that was operating with such a device?
It tends to accelerate natural beta decay processes, and
so that's a no.
Well,
otherwise,
define your nuclear reactor. If your nuclear reactor was a beta voltaic battery, then you could accelerate its decay.
Yeah, we know the Chinese have produced those, but they're not in common use.
I mean, they've been in satellites for a long time. They're just taking the carbon-14 or whatever it is, or
It's okay, Bob. It's just that it's a huge military weapon if you can turn off a nuclear reactor, and therefore you need to not do that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So if you read Parkhomov's book, he looked at plutonium-239. And found that he could not force that to alpha decay.
That's what I need to hear. Let's keep it like that, because otherwise we could get into all sorts of issues.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. So I don't know whether this is the right point to segue to the discussion of the day, but we can always come back to anything. Is there something that someone wants to say that's burning before we address what was the subject of today? No, okay. So Charles rightly came to me. He was having his own Agent Smith moment. which is what happens when you start thinking about this too much. Agent Smith is a great analogy from the Matrix films, where any individual, even the person themselves, can become their own Agent Smith, in that they believe it's their mission in life to stop something that they think is out of the ordinary, or is breaking the rules, or somehow challenging the status quo. And I had a fairly forthright conversation with him and Chris to get across the point that we've been facing this as a project all along. Initially, we were told as we were founding that we could not operate in the US. The reason being because of the 1950s Invention Sequencing Act, and also because even if they can't stop something because it doesn't get patented, or because they can't stop it, nip it in the bud, you end up with a situation where if you develop in another country, but there's enough of the work done in the US, they can demand a country that has any trading at all in dollars to stop the individual in that country. And I've had people in the US crying down the phone to me because the greatest things they ever invented in their life, they were never allowed to discuss. And I've had the same in France. So this isn't just an American problem. And so, and then we had, for instance, one of our former directors was at EPFL in Switzerland, and they got wind that he was doing so-called LENR research, cold fusion research, and he was renting a unit there, and they have an experimental tokamak there, and they demanded he leave his rented unit, regardless of the contract that was signed on long-term lease and whatever, because they didn't want the disrepute, And so this manifests itself in all kinds of ways. And I think, to be frank, someone who thought that they obviously knew something, or that they think that someone else knows something, decided to school Charles that he could be facing legal liability if someone was to share something that would end up by causing a technological advantage to an ally's enemy, as it were. And so this is why I was very clear at the start of considering supporting this endeavor, that we worked on things that were already patented and expired, and or we're using technology that is not controversial. And so, for instance, the Ultra experiment that came out of a serendipity is using a device that is in thousands of people's, millions of people's homes all over the world. It's not a controversial thing. You can buy it at your local electrical store. You can buy it on Amazon. And you're basically saying this thing that billions of times a year is used cannot be used because you're vibrating a piece of metal in it and you're observing it closely, right? I mean, it's so freaking absurd, right? The other thing with the CloudOff device, the CloudOff device is patented and it's expired, right? The Griggs hydrosonic pump was claiming effectively transmutation back in early 1990s, but they got nowhere with it. They were claiming excess heat, but they were getting nowhere with it. So after 2 years of no one giving them a time of day, he said, it doesn't produce any excess heat. It's just a very, very efficient boiler, right? And then he made a big company, sold it, and you can literally buy that device yourself today, uncontroversially, right? Moreover, the CloudOff versions and interpretations of the CloudOff type of hydrosonic pump is being sold all over the Soviet republics. And I will, just to help people as soon as I can bring the material together, There are companies in the Soviet republics that are selling these devices, and they're installed in hundreds, if not thousands, of locations. And I'll give you one example. It's like a very large health center in Moscow. And they show that even if they were heating the whole facility, both hot water, showers, heating, and stuff, if they were heating it with gas, which is practically free, it's still cheaper to use this using electricity, right? But at no point are they claiming excess heat. They're just saying it's just cheaper than using electricity, which has to be produced by almost free. Like it's absurd, but obviously it's producing excess heat, right? Now, if these things are available in the West, they are available in the Soviet sphere, including North Korea, by the way. Is someone really going to have a problem with us making a minimum viable product? I mean, it's absurd. The other thing about the Wintex, for instance, you can go and buy an air grinder today. They got a license before the patent was sold to Kraft Foods, and Kraft Foods had been using it in food production, right? So are we going to stop eating? Are we going to stop being in a warm place? Are we going to stop cleaning our dentures just because someone thinks that this is going to end the world? No. We've got to be bold and strong and take charge of our own destiny. And that is what this is, for me, the DAO is all about. It's about, there's a lot of people that are extremely capable, and they don't want to see their lives run out without these technologies making a difference to humanity in general. Now, there will still be people that will come along and cause problems. So, for instance, we managed to, Benjamin Huang and myself, fight the system and get that paper published in January of last year. I then spent the next 9 months fighting the system. That paper basically is still up online because we found out the scam of publishing. I'll just leave it at that, right? It's sick what's going on out there. But they did cause disrepute to the previous person that was able to publish something using cavitation. And that was Telyakin back in 2001 and 2003. And that was the US Navy destroying that person. Now, when I started talking about this ultra experiment being really, working, and the Kladov experiment, and Kladov being proven by the Russians in 2006 and 2009 using their hydrowave technology after the death of Kladov, I had this person pop up who used to work on US naval reactors, and in the 1990, I think he was assigned to safety in nuclear research, and he just pops up, and he then told me that I mentioned Leclerc, and he says Leclerc came to the US naval labs and he had nothing, and he was going on, and the guy's a nutter, and he was writing to me these things, and I'm thinking, I know you, because you do this, you pop up everywhere and start attacking something that's getting close to the truth. So here's the thing. I understand that Charles was a bit spooked, and you're going to get people trying to spook you. Now, they could be people who just think they're more important than everyone else, and that they think they can score a hit. There are a couple of people that tried to score a hit on the Benjamin Huang paper, and they worked very hard. They worked very hard to score a hit. They make it their job, and in fact, they are paid by the journals to get papers taken down. We've done the paper trail. That's literally what they are doing. So they have to alert, and then the second party has to have it taken down, and their whole reason to be is to get paid by the journals to do this process. So we found that out. So they weren't able to do a Telyakin on us because we're too stubborn, and the world's a bit different now. Now, if we are really seeing transmutation in there, Charles said, well, okay, this is, are they doing anything scary? Well, here's the thing. This process typically does not produce transuranics. Arguably, Leclerc did say that if you run this long enough, you do get transuranics, okay? But it is right at the tail end of the stellar synthesis. It's incredibly small parts per billion. And then if you were to get that parts per billion, run the experiment for a couple of 100 years and get a bunch of uranium, you then still have to refine it to 95 to 5%, 95% enrichment. It's just neither here nor there. Dirty bomb, dirty bomb. Right, okay. So we got those out of the way. So what I suggested, and I would like the community to help with this argument, is on the front page of the website. It's because the argument was that this guy was pretending that they knew that this technology is real. And so you can't be helping others to make it, right? And here's the thing. If you know it's real, stop us wasting our time, come out, publish it, and make it available for humanity's betterment. Right? Don't sit there saying we have to chop this mountain, we have to flood this rainforest, we have to mine this oil just so you can have your 2 flights in your lifetime and live in your 5-mile city. Right? You're creating a situation where you're causing the problem and then saying we're the cause of the problem when you already have the solution to solve the problem that you're saying we're causing. So we have something on the website that says, before you try and put us in jail for trying to make operable existing and expired patents that could change the course of humanity, if you know that this is possible, then just tell us. Don't try and put us into jail to stop us revealing it. Tell us how it's made, how to do it, where we can buy it, when we can get it manufactured, or shut up. Because we're taking charge of this for ourselves. No one is going to give it to us. It's been known, in my view, since at least the late 1800s. In some aspects, and definitely in the terms of the more exotic aspects and the very good understanding of the science between the latter half of the 1950s and the early part of the 1960s. And so,
Bob,
go on.
Would it help to have an attachment to something like Rex Research, where the patents, a lot of those old patents are sitting?
Yeah, it would do. But we need literally half of the first website to say, don't threaten us. If you think this is real, because I was saying to Charles, the whole point about the MFMP wasn't necessarily to do it. It's to push the whole thing so far forward that anyone that knows whether they are private or government, they will be forced to reveal it. And I said, I don't mind going to defending myself in a court of law, and they have to prove to me that low energy nuclear reactions can produce over unity energy so that they can put me in jail because I'm doing something wrong. I want them to prove to me in court that this is real. Right? Don't just lock me away. Where you have to be careful is you have to avoid, and the projects at several stages had to avoid being put into a situation where they can fake the death of someone that they can claim you're responsible for and then put an end to the process, right? Where they don't have to prove it's real, they just have to take you off the playing board. And that's where something like this DAO is incredibly powerful, because if all the information is open all of the time, then you have a situation where you have to shut down everything. You have to make research illegal. You say, we are going to stop humanity's progress at this point because you can't play with the toys we are playing with.
Well, then doesn't it help to be attached to open source networks where everything is kind of going?
Absolutely. This is open, so anyone can participate. That's the whole point of the process.
That way, so when something is, it actually goes out instantly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the saving grace of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing is, You want to be relentless. The point about being relentless, some people say, well, why aren't you focusing on what you did last week or the week before or the week before that? I say you have to be freaking relentless, because you want these bureaucratic organizations to try and work out how they're going to stitch you up on last year's story. And you're already two months or 3 months or a year down the line from there, and it's already in the open domain. You need to make the process unstoppable. Unstoppable.
Bob, I can just jump in there.
Yeah.
I mean, fundamentally, we've got to say the mission of the DAO is archiving and publishing. That's the primary mission, which means that we're not responsible for each individual experimenter. So the group is simply disseminating information that exists, is public information. And that way you avoid all this sort of cloak and dagger liability issues. You know, because, okay, maybe some guy works in a garage somewhere and comes up with something really weird and dangerous, but it's not the responsibility of the DAO. It's separate, right? Okay, he can disclose the data to the DAO and the DAO can distribute it. Okay? And I think that's the issue. And, you know, otherwise you will spend your life under a table in complete paranoia, thinking anything you do, you know, is potentially vital and dangerous, you know, so. Anyway, that's my view. I tend to do stuff first.
This is as I said to Charles and Chris earlier today. We have to understand how powerful we are. Look at what Griffin Brock did just because he tried.
Yeah.
He didn't think about the consequences of creating a device that could be a propulsion device, because he maybe didn't know. He didn't think about a device that could remediate waste at a distance or even produce linear reactions at a distance. He was trying to create a type of X-ray, and I believe it's a much better type of X-ray. And you don't want to shield from anything coming out of it. You want it to be the purest rays possible. Anything you put in the way is going to start capturing those atoms and then dumping them in the body it's passing through. But the fact that it's producing co-limited beams, it means you have this ability to produce much clearer X-rays, potentially a much lower dose of whatever it is. Much lower dose. At greater distances. It's a spectacular tool that he's shone a light on. I'm not trying to put a pun there, but it's really good. And that's how we need to view it. We need to view like just doing it. We can make some real big changes here, and we're not sharing anything that isn't already in the public domain.
Yeah, I think the main issue is where we cross into sort of WikiLeaks territory, and some, you know, black projects guy is a whistleblower, reveals information that's considered secret. But that's the only area where I'd say the organization's at risk.
But that's the point about having the forum. The forum can be where someone themselves puts the information. It's different. It is how when you need a flat organization, and the forum enables a flat organization where there isn't a person that gets the information in its secret squirrel and then they distribute it without knowing that it's secret. If you get the person that just puts it up on the forum, then it's the whole sort of publishing argument. You know, the individual's taken responsibility for the information that they knew and they shared it with the world. We're not hawking around secret information. What we're doing is we're trying to say that this patent that has delivered this tool is not available to most people without going to buy this device from these people who have some intellectual property that we don't want to get involved with, right? We want to take the existing claimed patent, and we want to make a working embodiment of that and move forward. The reality is the hydrosonics patents are, you know, all Grieg's work is out of patent, you know, but they're still making good money on it.
It's published.
Yeah.
It's a patent. It's published.
And you can freaking go and buy the devices.
Yeah. Yeah, my general advice would be not to be paranoid. I mean, just do stuff, publish stuff.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I'm looking for a phrase that we can put front and center on the website. We're saying, yes, please take us to court and prove that what we are doing is transformational.
Yeah.
We're ready. Make sure you've got the working devices that you can demonstrate in court.
Yeah. Well, I think even that is too sort of, sorry, egotistical. I mean, so often, people do a lot of science and no one gives a damn.
No, they don't
You
give a
do a lot,
damn.
and that's where we should be. That should be the space we're in. That we're just churning out this data, and most people think it's, the fringe end is totally crazy. The other people maybe a bit boring, and in that totality, there's something really valuable, and it grows. Is. I mean, I think that's our natural environment. I don't think we're going to be battling in court about details of a particular experiment. I don't think it will happen. I mean, okay. I hope we don't have some dark forces against us.
I have had threats, and I've had people telling me to resign from the MFMP because I was talking about ball lightning.
Wow. Okay.
And that came from a former director who was told by the heads of this field. And
right.
and here's the thing. When Steve, in Steve's place, thank you for Karen setting that up. He said that, what has been your biggest problem in doing this research? And I said, honestly, it's the Lena researchers, because they basically hid Matsumoto's work, they hid Ken Shoulder's work, and I think it's both because it was ball lightning. And I didn't go into the what happened to me and to the project, but it's all related to that. But when I share what I'm going to share on Sunday, you're going to know that this is how it works. You're going to know. And it's in a peer-reviewed paper that was published in 2019.
Perfect. Yeah.
And I didn't go back in history and force them to get that published and peer-reviewed. And it's not by no one. It's by the All Russian Nuclear Research Facility.
Right.
These are the top scientists. They've not only found the same things that I'm showing, there's a slight different interpretation, but they're saying it's the same thing. And in the conclusion, they're saying this is probably what drives tornadoes, weather systems, and you couldn't make it up. I mean, it's like I've been copying their work for the last 3 or 4 years.
People are going down parallel tracks.
And this is what I'm talking about. It's got to the point where you have to exercise the Semmelweis reflex, Semmelweis for Gordon Doherty, who reminded me the double should be a V. The Semmelweis reflex, you have to exercise that to continue to ignore this data.
Yeah, absolutely.
So many things have gotten forgotten for a while and shoved in the back that it's very convenient that way. But I have a question, Bob. I sent it to you. You were mentioned on Redacted.
Mm-hmm.
Minute 9, I sent that to you, but it had to do with what was happening with, so it's just a question for you, that has to do with the UFOs or whatever you want to call them. And they seem to think you had a solution or knowledge of that, and that you had been visited and being told to be quiet relative to that.
Well, certainly I've been told to be quiet. I did an interview with the Australian journalist, and I forget his name right now. Sorry.
Ross Cohort.
That's right. Ross Cohort. Sorry, Ross. And this was in early 2021, before he published his book, before he interviewed Grush, before he interviewed all these different people. And I told him, as the first person, actually, there's 2 people I told before that. One was a sponsor of the project early on. He's a Swedish guy. And he kept getting me to try and see the Serious Disclosure, Stephen Greer's project, right? And he kept saying, oh, you've got to see this, got to see this. And I didn't know what it was, right? But finally I thought, well, okay, he's really helped the project for 3 years now. I'll go and have a look. And I go, oh, it's about that and this, that, and the other. And I go, okay. So I the next time I saw him, which was up in Prague, I said, I've got to tell you something. I've never told this to anyone outside the family. And there's a guy who's watching the stream over there who's the second person I told outside the family before I told Russ Coulthard. And I told him about this experience that my father said in 1979 to me, my three brothers and my sisters, come downstairs, look out into the eastern sky in 32 Offington Gardens, Worthing, West Sussex in the UK, and these four lights just went.
Yeah.
And he said, right, kids, now you can go to bed. The point about that is, my dad is not an alien. Don't think he is. My mum might be an alien. But because my brother says that the Masons selected my mum for breeding because of certain things that she could do, like she could levitate and stuff like that, which I only found out about 3 years ago. But she could only do it as a child before she was embarrassed into not doing it. So it all seems a bit weird, and sorry, but that's just what my mum literally told me that straight faced. So okay, all right, mum, okay. But I definitely saw these things, and so I do not think that most of these objects that people are referring to are anything other than a technological device that we were already masters of in the UK in 1979. So I don't get excited about them, but I am interested in how they could have been made.
Yeah, I mean the phenomena. There's a sort of timeline story back to the Foo Fighters, 1943, Germany, the new type of radar the Germans were using. That radar's shipped to the UK, and it seems to be you can produce, if you've got ionized gas and a strong, powerful radar source, you can make plasma orbs.
Yeah, I speculated on that, and then that old BBC journalist put a very nice article together the other day, and I thought, I didn't know any of that. I just know what I saw, and I know it must have been possible, and then I read Paul Kapitza's paper, and it's exactly how I imagine the Ultra experiment is working. It's just working in a slightly different medium matrix.
But in fact, I mean, just a little bit of news. I mean, these plasma orbs are visible in London now. I mean, there was still ongoing flap in New Jersey, but there's one that keeps popping up over Primrose Hill, London Zoo, because it's out from my windows. And I do a bit of astronomy, and I know the difference between looking at Venus.
Right, yes.
Weird, all right? And
for those that don't know, Dr. Rupert Holmes has done a very nice video recently on the black sun that partner to our actual Sol.
Yeah, there's a book I wrote 2016. Yeah, but it's basically the idea that the solar system was born as a binary star system. And so even though I'm a molecular biologist, I sort of went back to UCL and did some astronomy. I mean, so I've got a little bit of astronomy.
Yeah, so it's a great analysis. So he's not talking out of his bum. So if he says he saw something, I'm minded to believe him.
Yeah. I can send you the videos. I mean,
great.
iPhone's capture, is not great, but it's definitely, it's not a planet, it's not a star. It's something unusual.
And so the point is that I have a good friend who lives here in Vienna, and she talks about the Galactic Federation, and they kind of come and give us all this technology, and it's like, I'm not really interested. I'm not even really interested in aliens. I just want life to be a bit better, and for them not to be planning all these restrictions on us because they say we're doing bad to the environment. You should be encouraging a project like the DAO with every fiber of your body. Because
and just as I know you're connected to Ashton Forbes, I mean, Ashton Forbes does a great job of just accumulating a lot of stuff.
He is a great communicator. He's a great communicator, and like when I said this actually to Charles earlier today, I said, look, when I had my existential moment, which Charles was having a bit earlier today, it was in 2017 when I realised that the event, we'll call it the event, but it happened in 2001, it was likely done with this technology. I had a choice to walk away from the field because I wanted to protect my ego and any reputation I thought I had, or I had to say what I believed to be true and face the music. And I chose the latter because I realized that the technology had been developed in the 1950s and 60s. It had been weaponized, and it's being used to subjugate humanity. And when it could actually free us, it's being used for the exact opposite purpose that it should be being used for. And I said to Ashton, we were out at some nightclub. I said, look, you can't bring these people back from the dead, just like I can't change all of the laws that were brought in, all of the mass migration, people leaving their homelands, and all of the millions of people and trillions of dollars that have been wasted as a result of what happened, which I call the event. And but what you can do is learn and educate on the science and make this benefit humanity. And he's got a really good reach, and he's done a fantastic job, and I support him in any way I can. Now, there is a guy in Australia who seems to think that the videos he's talking about, he made himself. I also discussed this with Charles earlier today. I said, look, as a remote viewer, which I didn't know I was until I was 44, and I was doing it since I could barely walk, you know, and as a creative, if this person doesn't say who asked him to do a favor to produce those 2 videos, that's like, okay, that's a red flag for me already, because like that might have been someone who wanted videos that did this, and how much information was given to him in terms of what the guy was looking for in these 2 videos, I don't know. But what I can say is any creative worth their salt should have some level of innate remote viewing, because if you ask a remote viewer, say, something has happened on the African continent, I want you to tell me what it is and where it is. And so they draw a picture like that, and that's what. So this is what you would say. Like, you remember that plane? Well, I want you to make a couple of videos that might look a bit freaky. So that creative would then go into the creation process, and the creative process is attaching to the Akashic record. People sometimes call it inspiration. You know, inspiration is like it's part of that process. You are asking your conscious tool here to find a solution that would be a plausible solution to the question you're being asked, which you might not know any of the important details at all. So your brain fills it in, and you think you've done the job, but actually you've actually found the truth. It's almost better that you're told less than. This is why I don't like to read. I haven't even read Ken Shoulder's book yet, deliberately. I don't want to know what other people think until I've seen it under the microscope. I publish my thoughts about it, and then I'll go and read the book. Yeah. I want to clean room it, and so so what he's done with that information is a masterclass in taking a problem which you can't solve, you can't bring those people back, and using that as a window to share information that is real, which is not being discussed. And it's being discussed at the highest levels, I would argue, in part because of his conversation. So full on hand, if you're watching this, Ashton, well done, mate.
No, really true. No, I use a lot of his references, and you know, he generates so much information. It takes a long time
because he's using the crowd well.
Yeah.
And this is what the MFMP's done. I constantly say thank you to all of the followers. Like, you know, we've got quite a few people on this chat right now that have sent me videos and information. You know, Diodon, Laszlo, Ian, like, sorry if I'm not naming everyone personally, but like I know there's 94 on YouTube. Many of these people have sent me stuff. I always try and give credit. The paper I'm going to discuss on Sunday was sent to me by someone, and I can't even believe I didn't find it because it's directly connected to other people I've discussed. But that's the point. I can overlook something for 4.5 or 5 years, which is really important to the story, because you can only do so much in a day. And Ashton is leveraging all of those people sending information. He's filtering out. It's what I've been doing for years. And that is what the DAO has the capability to do. on
Yeah.
a next
Well, that should be
level.
its primary function. It's
Yeah.
really valuable.
We've gone
important.
past that. Is this real, and can it be used with utility? We got to the point where I can't go out into a shop and buy a device for a reasonable amount of money that stops them telling me I can't take more than 2 flights in my lifetime.
Yeah. No,
I want to be able to take as many flights as I like, and I want them to last only 2 seconds.
yeah.
Now you're talking.
Walk.
And be in a wood steampunk UFO. Ideally.
Well, Tesla was talking about that in an interview to the Times in about 1930 something, wasn't
No,
it?
1911, Times, New York.
Yeah.
The application of this principle will realize a flying machine hereto never seen before. It'll have no screw propellers or control surfaces of any kind, but it will fly. It can be made of any shape, carry any weight, and fly at fantastic speeds in any weather. Something along those lines. I paraphrase. Sorry, Tesla.
Yes. Can't come soon enough for me.
Yeah. Well, it's already here. We're just not allowed to have it. I do understand that it emits UV and soft X-rays, right? You want to be in it before you spin it up. You definitely don't want to be in the wrong part of it because it'll start merging your energy space-time matrix with the rest of the bit that's around the device, and you'll end up like mush. So there's reasons why you would want to have it well engineered and stuff. So and yeah, cancer's cancer if you get it from this, you know, and of course it messes up your consciousness. So there's issues, but like depending on whether you want something that can go extremely fast and you're in stasis, or whether you just want it to be traveling at, I don't know, Mach 13. Mach 13, you can configure it so, in my view, so that you don't have the time distortion problems with your brain, right? Because it's still not a problem. And so maybe we might have to have 20 seconds to get to the other side of the planet, and I can live with that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm generally interested in sort of the biology, quantum mechanics interface. And, you know, I told in the last meeting, you know, I'm messing around with these porphyrins and iron porphyrins, like micro toroids. But you get into really boring science, you know, like getting the stuff to go in solution. You know, it's that sort of, you know, you end up sort of like oil water emulsion effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying you can disappear into sort of experimental science, not make much progress. But you know, anyway, I'm just saying generally that's not interesting.
The point is that every single thread that you pull on this potential is an entire university department running for possibly centuries.
Yeah.
You know, it needs an all of humanity because you're literally opening Pandora's box. This is Pandora's box, by the way. It's the Pandora's box. There ain't no Pandora's box beyond this because it's the God's toolbox. It's literally Schwerblis was invited in 1988 into that Moscow basement because he was trying to create an electrodynamic way to manipulate DNA. And he was doing a coil of a coil of a coil of a coil. That's the DNA. And that's why they thought, well, this might help you with your quest.
Yeah.
And so it is, that's the point about it. It needs skills from all levels. It needs to be multidisciplined. And so the fact that you're a biochemist or biologist by trade, that doesn't exclude you. That means you're an important part of the puzzle.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so I can stop talking, guys. You have questions for Charles first on you know, what's the thing that, you know, you would like to ask of Charles most?
Actually, I'd like to ask about a systematic way of funding kind of advanced out-of-the-box research, and then yeah, you can have artificial intelligence, okay, for doing stock trading, and then can have your own cryptocurrency and form your own microeconomy. So I think that we could do experiments on that, and then the goal would not be information. The goal would be to have the financial capability to sponsor the research and make these advancements.
I completely agree, sir. So what we will enable or have enabled is funding in any cryptocurrency, as long as it's on an Ethereum virtual machine chain. We have Martin, who I think, yeah, he's still in here. He has been looking at AI trading bots. So literally yesterday or the day before, we were talking about which trading strategies may be employed on these trading bots. I've got two other AI companies which I've invested in. They're focusing on AI trading bots. So we will have some sort of mechanism for either a community-owned trading bot or one that we just have as just a regular bot. Having our own cryptocurrency is something that we could do in the future. I'm trying to stay away from having that until we've got some decent revenue coming in. The reason is most people associate a token with the actual project, and if we don't have any revenue, it could cause a drop in the token price. And I'd rather wait until we actually have something of substance before releasing a token. So that's my opinion on that at the moment, or the opinion that we've got to at the moment after a lot of consultation with the community.
Just a straw in the wind, we've got potentially much more value than we realize in some of the things we're doing. Although we're not primarily in it to make money, peripheral organizations around us will certainly do that. I was very interested to look into the stock and share value of the Bendel Plasmoid Research Organization. Well, you could buy a share for 7.5 pence before Christmas, and now you can buy one for 10 pence.
Interesting.
I think that makes the point that now they're starting to pump the things out. There's going to be money to be made in that organization. I think we ought to be looking at exactly how we would leverage that kind of approach to make sure that we're well funded and independent. It doesn't have to compromise the processes of the DAO, but it certainly does have to have a place in this independent funding that we're so keen to have.
So one mechanism we could do is a fair launch where we give away the vast majority of tokens. That isn't necessarily the best thing for a DAO. The other thing we can do is an ICO. So we can literally sell tokens to people if we wanted to. And that would essentially give them equity in the company and allow them to take some sort of compensation coming out of the DAO every single year.
Yeah, and limit the size of each investment simply to avoid being taken over.
Yeah, so we can, within the smart contract, put limits on the percentage amount of total supply each wallet can hold. We can also implement KYC on anyone who owns above 5%, as long as we know what wallets they hold.
I have a question regarding the Bentall thing, because Bob, you were working on it for a while. I was there when he was previewing it at Tesla Tech, and it was, in my mind, a disaster. And I know that there has been a lot of back and forth going on behind the scenes. So I just want to know whether it's actually real, because there's a lot of question whether it is or isn't. So before anybody would invest, I would think you'd want to sort of like make sure that was viable.
Okay, so I can give you my thank you very much, Ian. Is this your version or something you've? My
version?
No, Ian. Let me answer Karen's question first, and then please tell us what your device is that he was waving around. So I never wanted to get involved with Malcolm Bendel's device. We were already working on the GEET. The GEET has a book associated called the Book of GEET, Global Environmental Energy Technology. I have been able to explain every anomalous observation in the Book of GEET trivially from the same process that we are looking at. So the water producing a tornado coming up to just outside is because the substructures in the ball lightning-like structure is bleeding out and producing a vortex in the ether, and that affects water in the same way that I believe it's doing it in the pyramid. The independent replications where they've had a glass window on the top and they see blue light, that is because of the difference in the permittivity of the vacuum, blue shifting the light and causing blue UV to 2 kilo electron volt photons coming out. The same way EVOs work, and in part, I believe, the same way that Star in a Jar is working. All of the same processes. even down to the fact that he has a north and south pole, and that produces this great. He even says that in one reactor, the entire thing disappeared. Okay, now the claims for the GEAT are largely the same as the claims for Malcolm Bendel's device. Okay, and people have been able to replicate that, and I met people in Thorsten Ludwig. They were the organizers of the conference in Switzerland. They have been able to replicate the GEAT. The thing about the GEAT is it's fantastically difficult to get right. Now, I have seen these flux loops in many different systems, and I've visually seen them in Henk Uren's Vega reactor, and both in aftermath but actually on video. And so has Bogdanovich et al. At the Moscow Nuclear Physics Institute, where they actually specifically state it's a monopole at one end and a monopole at the other end, and it's a flux loop between the two. Okay, and I'll talk about more on this on Sunday, but essentially this was predicted by Paul Dirac, where you have these dions and they get separated, and you have a monopole at one end and they can actually be broken apart, so the monopole comes away. We now, I believe, understand how the topological monopole forms, and just to put some essence, to some specificity to that, it's like the Boyd-Bushman directional north or south poles, which I think Dr. Rupert Holmes had a hack at quite effectively. I would say. I'd like to see.
I'll get it.
Yeah, well, that'd be nice. And so there was this testing going on at Looking for Heat. These are the people that investigated Rossi, and there was a whole story about that, but that's a separate story. And they were seeing stuff that they could not explain in their testing. And someone at Los Alamos said, well, maybe this guy Bolgrina might have a view on it. And so he reached out to me by sending me this video that was recorded in Thailand about 8 years ago, and it's publicly available, where you see these, what looks like a plasma stream coming out of the device and going in and moving around, right? And this is coming through stainless steel into the normal air. And when I saw that, I knew 100% certainly that that video was showing the effect that does the work. And that effect can cause matter to be transmuted in the same way that's been observed by Ken Shoulders, ourselves, and Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto, right? Spheres, flux loop coming out. And you're going to see again in this paper that I share from the Moscow Nuclear Physics Institute on Sunday. This is done. It works. So that I didn't have a device to analyze. I didn't have a device to test. But he started sending me these pictures. I predicted that in Switzerland, having never seen a device work, that it would be working on the basis of ball lightning. You're probably going to see iron-rich crenellated spheres, and it's important to increase the water content of the fuel going in, increase the temperature, thermocatalytically splitting it, going in, and you're going to get all the charge clusters blowing up in there. And when it comes back out, all you need is hydrodynamic shear and charge separation. And that system that he has is producing bucket loads of those. So that's where I was in that presentation. I didn't think what he called the ionizer, which it isn't an ionizer, it's at best an energizer because it doesn't have UV that's able to ionize it. I didn't think that was so relevant. And I didn't think the bubbler was so relevant, and it's not novel because the bubbler is in the GEAT anyway. So an ionization is in the Paul Collock patent for producing ball lightning in 1973. So that's not patentable either. But the actual form and function of the spheres and the counter-rotating forces and the way the heat exchange is going on is the novel aspect of that device, and it's doing the most important thing that's necessary to do. Okay, so I said my piece then. And then a couple of weeks, whenever it was later, he sent me some pictures of something I didn't even know existed. And it was off this 400 kVA natural gas generator that it had down in Melbourne with this 24-inch sphere on it. And this had been shipped over to London, and they'd cut it in half, and he'd taken some videos of some sparkly bits on the inside. I said, Malcolm, stop it, wrap it up, you're contaminating it. I said, I'm going to be over on the next plane, I'll bring some video recording equipment, and I expected to see what we have replicated and what Matsumoto saw, which were these hexagonal arrays of structures, which you can see on his book here, not in colour, but it will be in colour in the new version, 178, page 178, these structures. That's what I expected to see. These are the signatures. And Johanna James was there, and because I want other people to see this without me being involved, I showed her how to use the camera. I said, go and look over there. And I fully expected it to be there, and it was there, everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And I said, well, there you go. So it's got the external visual signatures. You've got the claims that's the same as Geet. You've got the transmutation the same as Geet. It's already been done by Matsumoto, by ourselves. And what I'm going to ask you for now, Malcolm, is samples of this sphere, so I can put it under an SEM. He says, oh, I want it in the Smithsonian Museum. And I said, well, that's it. I'm done. I don't have to do this anymore. And then 2 days later, he sent over Kyan. And Kyan... you've got something there, have you? Okay, you're sharing a screen. He sent over Kyan with some samples, and I took them up to Prague, and I put them under the SEM, and within seconds, we found the iron-rich crenellated microspheres in the centre of those hexagonal structures, and there are fractal, smaller versions of them at different scales. And these are the active centres in which you are doing work. So the question is, does it work? I don't know. Can it work? Absolutely yes. Now the question is, do you want to be on the side of the fence that says, I took the wrong investment call? This is not investment advice. But he has the thing going on. Now, in the production of iron-rich crenellated microspheres, which I predicted would occur in the Ultra experiment that my colleague Alan Goldwater did, I phoned him up and said, look, I've just replicated what David Boutlier did with his Ultra experiment. He found these little, the peaks and troughs became magnetic, and they're in aluminium, right? So at least iron must be concentrated there, and it's becoming ferromagnetic enough so that you can pick up those bits. I said, I predict that if you run a piece of aluminium long enough, that you're going to find you're going to get iron-rich crenellated microspheres. I said, because that's what this process produces. So he went out, got some particular Reynolds wrap. He put it in there, ran it for 900 seconds, ran a magnet around, put it under the SEM, loads of iron-rich crenellated microspheres. So that was 900 seconds. That device in Australia had run for 500 hours over 8 years. Now, my question is, was all of the structures that I saw produced in a very, very small window of that 500 hours? You see what I'm saying? If we can produce a load of these things in 90 seconds, was it produced in a 90-second period amongst that 500 hours and nothing else happened after that? That's all I can say. Those are the facts on the table. But the point is, every single time you run an Ultra experiment, it produces these structures. In 843 thousandths of a second, you start getting them producing. Now, when you've got an engine running, you've got a vibration. You're going to have harmonics of those vibrations. The beautiful thing about having a sphere is when you've got sound waves traveling around those spheres and they're all mixing, you've got all kinds of ways you're going to get standing waves producing. And it's at the nodes and antinodes where the action happens. Transverse to that, in a highly charged separated material, combined with shear. I can imagine in my head that some people aren't able to do this, but I can imagine that this would happen like that. It very shortly after you're turning it on, it's starting to produce these structures. Now, what I can say, and you're going to see yet again in this paper on Sunday, is that these structures once formed, they persist for days. And Ken Shoulders was very clear, and our research with the Lion reactors showed that they could be persistent in metals for 9 months. And then the Russians wanted to up the ante and said, I can piss further than you. And they said, we re-exposed our bismuth assaults on gold, whatever it was that Baranov was doing, to sunlight after 18 months. And it produced strange radiation tracks. But Ken Shoulders was very clear in saying that these structures can live in the metal indefinitely. I do know from the Vega experiments, both David Bouteliers and Henk Urians, when you turn the reactors back on, as long as you've got the right gas pressure and your passion curves are right, instantaneously the balls like to form where they were before. So there's something left. There's an echo of this electrodynamic structure that is in the metal that's standing there ready to do work when it's being given charged particles. And it self-organizes like switching on a light bulb. So when Malcolm didn't understand a jot when I met him. Nothing at all. His idea of how a bubble collapses on both sides is nonsense, right? It just doesn't do that. It either collapses all the way in, or it's near a surface and you've got a pressure differential and it produces a reentrant jet. It just doesn't collapse into a torus, right? But when it collapses near to a surface, it comes round and you get a torus forming like that. Yes, that happens, right? But it doesn't matter. Sometimes people do amazing things by asking all of the wrong questions. Just because they are persistent. And I've said this all of the time about Malcolm. Malcolm's superpower is that he does not give up. And he keeps trying. And he's very good at motivating people to do even things they really don't want to do. But to just take the story forward. The reality is, this is so freaking simple to do. It's absurd that we haven't all been using it forever. Nature wants to produce these structures more than they want to produce anything else. In a charge separated environment with hydrodynamic shear. And so my proviso is we could make those iron rich crenellated spheres in a 900 second period in water, in a cavitation device, an ultra device experiment. Did that happen? The one that Alan Goldwater did. If you look at go and look at my presentation in 2022 in Azizi, you can go and look at it's just type in ultra and it's got a picture of the cavitation peak. So there's 3 pictures on there, and the last one is an iron rich crenellated sphere, and you can follow that whole story in there. So my point is that the spherical structures are a signature. They're iron and oxygen based because oxygen is paramagnetic. Iron is ferromagnetic, and this iron oxide is ferromagnetic as well. And it's the core of the magnetic monopole. It's the most magnetic thing that can exist. These structures are the way you can make the most magnetic thing ever. There's nothing beyond this. And the magnetic pressures are unimaginable. It grabs in magnetic material, ferromagnetic, paramagnetic, protons, atomic hydrogen, oxygen, and it sets to work. And what do you have when you have a hydrocarbon? You have protons, if you're stripping it off the hydrocarbon, or you're stripping it off the oxygen, and then you've got oxygen when you split the oxygen. So by splitting the oxygen coming in thermocatalytically on the metal, you're producing hydrogen and oxygen that's going in. You want it to be ideally protons or atomic hydrogen coming in. And then that can take part in building these structures. Just as it does with the HHO gas.
I was going to say that? Isn't that what George Weissman is the expert on in essence? Him and
Well, he has certain views on it. I think Amaz has got his views on it. I think Amaz has done extensive research, but George Weissman has. But
yeah,
yeah,
visit.
yeah, yeah.
I must say that, Bob, I would like to give a shout out to the poor British standards testers who were dragged to test the thing.
Oh.
Apparently, they almost balked at the whole idea and announced that they were wasting their time. But Johanna James reports that once they were actually had their noses rubbed in it, they did agree it did actually work as advertised.
It definitely does something. I was locked in a room which had not enough ventilation for 4 hours with a running generator. And it wasn't until after that, well, during that, I thought, well, I managed to secure myself a personal carbon monoxide meter, and I went over and it only started beeping when I was 2 inches from the exhaust, right?
Ridiculous, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And the following day, I announced the fact that I'd done this what should I say? Clandestine test without asking anyone, but it was serendipitous as well. And I said, look, do you have any unmodified generators I can do repeat the test on? And he says, well, I'm not going to run it indoors. And I said, okay. And so he pulled it outside. He turned it on, and I must have been 8 meters away or something, and it immediately started beeping in my hand. And it was over 500 parts per million, which is the maximum it can read, which is death in minutes or seconds, when I was 2 meters away from it, right? So, and I've argued, because, you know, I verified what Phil Dubois found, which is this counter vortex going in, and I've argued that potentially part of its action is as like an afterburner. Anything that's not burnt is having extra oxygen sucked in, and that is then not coming out. It's not coming out unburnt. But you know, if that's the case, then that's great too, because like you know, you go to a lot of effort to make a catalytic converter which has 2 modes to it. In one part, it's removing the oxygen from the nitrogen, and then it's using the extra oxygen it releases from the nitrogen to complete the burn in the second part of the catalytic converter. And it uses energy to do that, and it uses precious metals. And so if at the end of the day, it's nothing more than a very cheap catalytic converter, then that has implications for, if you haven't lived in an Indian city as I have, for the health of hundreds of millions of people. So that alone is worth it. So even if it doesn't do any of the magic that it clearly is capable of doing, at least for a few tens or hundreds of seconds in an 8-year period, right? It definitely can do it for a small period of time. If it's not doing it all of the time, which I suspect it probably is, but if it's not, it's at least burning the fuel cleaner so that you're not causing brain damage before these kids have ever got to adulthood. So there's all kinds of reasons why it should be considered. And it just, right now, he's selling kits for what, $700. And these are already landing in people's houses. Is that one you bought, or is that one you've made? So Ian, tell us what you got in your hand.
Yeah, so this is a thunderstorm generator that just came to me on our Christmas Eve. It was made in Thailand and shipped from Thailand. So my story on this is that I took Nassim Haramein's course in 2012. And I struggled for 10 years with all this knowledge, trying to talk to people, and like, just, they look at you and their eyes go blank and they tell you to dumb it down. And I'm like, just, it's driving me nuts for like 10 years. And then I found your group, like you and the thunderstorm generator, around last June. And I just went, woof. I went right up on the roof. I was like going crazy, because like, to me, this represents a working device that you can show people and go, look, there's oxygen coming out the tailpipe. Now you have to listen. Now you have to believe, because I'm showing you this. Because as Bob said, people have their programming and their belief structures, and everything they take in goes through that filtering device and then gets compartmentalized into some kind of saying or belief structure that they have. And to try and break that is like, you've got to break it. It's really hard. So when I found out about this and I found out about Alpha Prospects, I began communicating with them, and I was really like on the fence. I didn't know whether any of this was true. But I just sort of picked up a couple of signals, and I talked with some friends I had, and they said, don't invest. This is like, and I heard they were building the factory and they were going to be coming out with it. And I felt that maybe they needed some cash infusion, so I would invest. And I fully expect to lose the money. You know, it's not an investment that I'm wanting money from. I'm trying to go look at these people may have something. So I threw some money at them for investment, and then they offered to sell me one of these, and I bought it. So now I've been in this thing with my basement here. You can't really see it. Renovating my basement for the last month so that I can start trying to teach this to people, because, you know, when I listen to Bob, like, you're amazing. Every time I listen to you, I learn more and more and more. There's so much information in what you're delivering. It's hard for people to take it in. So
I might have a solution to that. A guy called Aaron, he's just done a fantastic 150-page slide set, and I'm just going to go through it, correct it later this week, and I'm going to release it. He's done a fantastic job. I need to improve some of the visuals he's put in there. So for people starting out, it's going to get easier. But from my point of view, I didn't want to make everything perfect until I actually knew what I was talking about, you know, until I got it right. And now I'm confident enough that, you know, it was a watershed moment, for instance, looking at Brock's electrode. It's one thing to imagine in my head that Brock's electrode would have all those things on it in that particular shape, right? But it had it. And it tells you even more about what's going on. And you're going to see that the Russians have it. They've got this thing, and they just said, oh, this is an impact mark of one of these plasmoids on the structure, and it's got a butterfly shape. And it's like, yeah, you can't see it, can you? You can't see it. It's perfect. And it's just always the same thing. And that is going on in that device. Whether it's doing anything, whatever. But like I say, at worst, if it cleans up the air in dirty cities and it's not involving, you know, $1,000 worth of precious metals that actually use about 25,000 miles worth of natural gas to extract from the ground and refine. You just the catalytic converter on your car has used about 25,000 miles worth of gas to be made a catalytic converter. You know, if you crash your car before you've got 25,000 miles on the clock, you might as well have bought an old banger.
Are you aware of any chemical analysis on the pre-bubbler by any chance?
Well, the pre-bubbler, some people make this mistake because there was some rather badly drawn initial diagrams put out there where there was some kind of recycling of the gases going through. Now, actually, there is a awarded patent which cunningly uses a little bit of extraction of the exhaust gas, because what is in the exhaust gas of an efficiently burning device? There's water. And if you have water in a bubbler and you're putting water coming out of the bubbler into the device, you're going to constantly run down your bubbler. But if you're extracting it out of the exhaust, then you're constantly replenishing it, right? So this is already an existing patent that they are trying to secure. So they actually have an awarded patent to go alongside their one that's, you know, being applied for, okay? So the water, I would expect, would just stay as water. Now, they suspect that there is some change in alkalinity, and I think Robert Haralick is doing some studies on that. And if that's the case, typically, if you're getting more alkalinity, that means that you are somehow either converting some of the hydrogen to deuterons in the water so that then you can't form proper H2O. You understand? So you take H2O and you take the proton and electron, you make a neutron, that goes into the hydrogen, you end up with a deuteron and an H, and so effectively you have OD minus, OD plus, so you end up with it becoming more alkaline because you're removing H plus, so H plus to OH minus. You're removing H plus from the water, so it becomes more alkaline. So that might be going on, or it's actually splitting the water because of cavitation. There will be cavitation going on there in some degree for this reason. When you see the bubbler working, it's producing a low pressure. If the low pressure is sufficient and rapid enough, it'll cause a phase change. Effectively, the water is boiling. And when that slaps back down, that'll cause a cavitation collapse, which may be sufficient within all of the parameter space to occasionally produce some normal kind of cavitation type reactions. Over and above that, because of the way it's pulling in and it's slamming back, it's causing a water hammer pressure effect. So it's not only the just normal adiabatic compression of the bubble, it's also the fact that you've got a back pressure coming out the engine that's slapping it hard. So yes, there could be something more interesting going on in there. But I argue, and it's called Jenkins. You can go and look up Jenkins' patent. I thought, well, why don't you just use a mister like has been used by the guy in the early 2000s when he was replicating the Grenoble work. So even though Jenkins put this in his patent, it wasn't an original idea. The Jenkins patent was from 2010, 11 or 12, or it's got another 10 years to run. Okay, so this is the patent. It's called Walt Jenkins patent, and it has many of the similar aspects that is in the patent application and work of Malcolm Bendel, including this water extraction from the exhaust. But he uses these piezoelectric drivers to put water mist in there. Now, the piezoelectric drivers are literally ultrasound. They're going to be producing cavitation bubbles in the water in the same way that's going on in the ultra reactor. So it might not be just adding water. It might actually be doing cavitation, but it's a little bit simpler and easy to increase the humidity going into the engine with an ultrasound mister than it is with, you know, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but Paul Pantone did a better job of the bubbler that we've seen on every version of Malcolm's device so far, right? in my view, Paul Pantone had these nice steel chambers and stuff, and they were good bubblers, right? So I think it's most important to just add water in there. We know an engine burns more efficiently and clean when there's higher humidity in the device. This is why if you're in a high humid environment and it's cool, you will end up with a more efficient burn. This is just known. It's been known for like forever, right? So that in itself will produce a cleaner burn. Yes, sorry.
Maury King,
Mm-hmm.
not last year before, actually presented on Walt Jenkins' device, and he actually gave more secrets to it. And the detail of what Walt Jenkins was doing to see.
Yes, I actually saw Maury's presentation on that post me finding out that Malcolm was working with the Jenkins family and the current patent holders to get a license or purchase it into their portfolio.
In the Geneva device that actually does cavitation and spin, which is a water device, it
Yeah.
actually does it to more alkaline water. So
Yeah.
it actually do that.
Yeah, if you cavitate and you end up releasing, so water is freaking amazing. It's much more interesting than just H2O. All of the time, firstly, Preparata has a whole book on the coherent ground state of water, and like something like 40 to 60% of water is in a coherent state anyway at room temperature, and then when you start doing things to it, you've got things going on at the surface, you've got things going on boundaries that aren't with air-water surfaces, and then when you do phase changes, the structures in the water, it's a polar molecule, it can form charges. This is my hypothesis. By when you start spinning that in a torus and you get a phase change in there, you're going to get an organization of the charges, which ends up being an electric current. And because it's spinning around in a torus, it ends up being a toroidal moment structure, and that's why the ultra works. It's building what you do in a plasma, but it's using the water in a way that it becomes like a plasma, and so it produces currents and current structures. And so when you're having cavitation or you're having a vortex going on, you're going to end up with asymmetries, the shear, and cavitation, and this is going to lead to, most likely, the formation of alkalinity. And Robert Haralick is looking into this, and what they're saying is that the what he calls an ionizer, and I keep having to remind him it's not an ionizer because it doesn't ionize, but it can energize the air coming in. If he was using an ionizer, we'd say yes, it's an ionizer, but he's not using the frequencies that ionize air. But that can help precondition the air coming in. But I don't think that's important. And in the tests that I've seen, it's not shown to be important. If you are getting water that's increasingly alkaline, there's the other aspect about water. You've constantly got a balance between OH minus, H plus, and H2O, and these things are constantly moving around, right? It's how electrolysis works. You know, it's made possible by this process, and so you might have a situation where the process that's been going on actually releases some hydrogen and leaves too much OH minus behind.
There's something George sent me the other day, and it
sorry,
was
what?
because I'm doing. It's something George Weissman sent me the other day because I'm doing a water book that just kind of gives you an overview.
Right.
And he was just talking about how he's got some way that he's got it. So he actually said the fourth phase of water is not water, it's a gel. And that working with Pollock, and by the way, it's crystalline and all that.
Yeah, it's these overlaid offset hexagonal matrices.
Yeah. Anyway.
Like easy water, that Pollock's work.
Yeah. Easy water is critical to my understanding of how the ultra experiment works, because you have a metal, and so the metal will help change the space charge within the water, and so it ends up causing it to layer and
like a double boundary layer effect.
Sorry, what?
Like a double boundary layer effect.
Whatever, it ends up with a different arrangement of the polar molecules and space charge within it, and then when you're shifting that on there, you end up by creating current structures. It's so obvious, it's mind-boggling when you think how obvious it is. But when you see a cavitator, you just think, oh, it's making sound in water. That's all there is to there.
So you don't think
I'll
that
give you a quick Boyd Bushman. Do you want to Boyd? Sorry.
Oh yes, show your tool. Oh sorry, Diadan. Did you want to add more there, because I know you're doing some water experiments, aren't you?
But there's two monopoles.
Okay.
North and south.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can show you with the actual sheet.
Maybe.
Oh, it changes there. Okay. So. Anyway, but that's the idea. These are neodymium magnets, and they're opposite polarity, and so there's got something going on between the two.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see it on my thing.
All right. Okay. So
but that's a wooden stick, so it doesn't interfere with it.
When you move that, when you pull those apart and take the wood out, what happens?
Well, they want to click together. They want to go together.
I'm not asking you to pinch your fingers, mate.
Boom, you see, they
Right,
go together.
yeah.
They're north and south. All right.
Yeah.
And then I can't get them out.
Oh, we'll leave you struggling like that.
It's going to take some time. No, I've got it. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. Ah, done it. We go.
I think Darren at University of it's Walter Russell's work.
Yeah.
He's done a lot. Up a video relative to the polarity and the water and how it and I mean the magnets and how they actually work and how we have it wrong and how Walter Russell had it right. So it might be interesting for you to look at that video.
Yeah.
I have to find it. There is yeah. And it's not that we have two poles. We said we have 4 poles. So that's kind of what you've been playing with. That's what made me think of that.
Yeah.
Very interesting. You could try that experiment that what's his apotheosis or what his name is. Try a big bowl of water and freeze it with those suspended in it, and see if you get a difference in the vorticity of the bubbles produced in the cosmic egg that gets formed.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, because no one's done that with the Boyd Bushman beam generator.
Yeah, well, I was thinking just popping this inside a cavitation, like a ultrasound cavitation thing, and see if you can do something strange.
Well, you have to be careful because the ceramic that the nidimiums are made from decays really, really quickly when it gets exposed to water, and the cavitation is just going to rip the chrome covering off that, which is the only thing that really protects it. And the other, you'll be fine because I think the Curie, the point at which it breaks down is about 50 degrees. What is it, an ND52 or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the typical neodymium magnet.
Yeah, so they lose all their magnetivity, their power when they go over about 60 degrees or something.
Right.
Diodon, you had something to show us.
Yeah, if you want to see it, I can.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
One experiment of many over the years. Hold on a second. I think it's this one.
Nick Moore has told me who I should have mentioned, Ken Wheeler.
Ken Wheeler's done a lot of work on.
Yeah, but that particular experiment.
I don't know if this is coming up. Can you see it?
Yeah.
All right, that's not the one though.
Okay.
It's this one. This is a nitinol wire, nickel, titanium, and ultrasonic, and I used a glass beaker to try to avoid any possibility of ferro. What's up? Where's that? That was my video, probably. Can't find the one that. There it is. Maybe you can see. But you were talking about flux lines earlier. If you look closely, you can see flux lines. I don't know if it's from just the ultrasonic in the center of the apparatus. Are you guys seeing this video?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can see the migration of the bubbles going across, and then when they collapse, ejecting material.
Yeah, they're shooting out.
Yeah, but in many cases they shoot out and actually fold back on themselves. So you can see. I don't know if you can see my mouse.
No, I can see it. It's very clear, actually.
Yeah.
I hope they're seeing it. Yeah, you can see it on YouTube.
Yeah. So that was with a nitinol wire, but I used the electrolysis process to make a outer oxide layer, just for like extra dielectric boundary layer, and also to have a porous substrate, porous topology. So.
Awesome. Karen, what did you thanks for sharing that. Karen, you shared something in the chat, yes? Okay, so you've given the link there for those people on YouTube. That's the link there. What was that to, Karen? You're muted. You're muted. You're still muted.
Thought I should behave. It is how Darren was talking about how magnetism, how we understand it, doesn't work the way we think it does. And it went back to what the other gentleman, Hubert, was doing, Dr. Hubert, was kind of showing. And I thought it might help him kind of look at it. And exactly, I think the experiment would be kind of fun.
Excellent. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to see if there's any questions on... Have you been tracking questions, Charles, on YouTube?
Yes, I've been answering a few that have been coming up, but yeah, everyone just seems to be very positive, really. Loving your chat. I think there's going to be a few people chopping up what you've been saying to make little videos.
Oh, well, they're welcome to it. I'm not afraid of that.
Can I comment then about deuterium?
Yeah, go for it.
From a medical perspective and from my investigations into my own health and trying to improve my health, I came across a couple researchers, Stephanie Seneff and Boas Lazios, who spoke a lot about deuterium. And Stephanie is of the belief that the whole methylation cycle that we go through to produce energy is to separate deuterium out of the water, because deuterium, carrying the neutron, actually plugs proton pumps in mitochondrial membranes. So this can cause a membrane failure in mitochondria, which results in something called cell danger response and a series of actions that the mitochondria takes to kind of separate itself from the community. So deuterium and hydronium and protium become sort of three different, I'll call it levels of hydrogen, where the protium goes towards the lipophilic membrane, the hydronium goes towards the bulk water, and this is just using exclusion zone language. And then the deuterium gets pushed into tissues, and deuterium is because of its density and weight, it gets pushed into bone, creating bone and creating connective tissues, collagen. I just saw some stuff from Vita Austin recently where her freezing technique is to put it into her water into the freezer and pull it out just before the whole thing freezes. So I have a technique for making low deuterium water, which is you take a bottle of water and you put it in the freezer, and when 1/3 of it is frozen, you pour the water out, because that will be more alkaline. It will also have less deuterium because deuterium freezes first. So it's, when I'm listening to you talk about all this stuff, the applications for biology are massive. The other thing that I wanted to comment on was red blood cells and carbon dioxide and oxygen, CO2, H2O. It's interaction within the right blood cell, using Malcolm's description of a feedback on this, because it's kind of like these things I'm trying to chase down.
Well, certainly, when I was with Amaza, and this was before the craze that I will talk about subsequent to this part of the sentence, he has had people buy for many years, more than a decade, I think, his HHO generators for cancer treatment and for breathing for health reasons. And I know George Wiseman sells devices on that same basis. Of course, since I was with Amaza in 2019, the commercial manufacture of hydrogen-rich water generators is massive now. You can go on Amazon, you can buy a hydrogen water bottle where you put your water in and you can charge the lithium-ion battery up, and it has a proton exchange membrane in there, and it just kicks the oxygen out of a little hole so that doesn't go into the water, and it's a pressure chamber. And basically the idea is that you're not breathing it in this case. What you're doing is you are loading the water with nanobubbles of hydrogen, and then you drink it and it diffuses into your bloodstream.
I can speak to two things.
Yeah,
One,
go for it.
Drink.
And it sounds like you, Karen, and Paul should all get together and consider the health implications of water.
Well, I was going to tell you, there's a site called drinklightwater.com, and they sell deuterium depleted water, and there's a ton of research on mitochondria and how it actually does. I mean, think about it. Deuterium is the third part of water where it's heavy. So the heavy water is how we created the bomb. So when you actually look at it running through your cells, it slows down and clogs things up. So by actually having deuterium depleted water that you can drink, you're actually lightening up the load on your system, and it actually helps and heals it. In Russia, they've done research where they've actually healed cancer with deuterium depleted water just because it does those things. And I'm going to read you what George Weissman sent me the other day, because I was working on my water book, and it has to do with deuterium. And here's what he wrote. The mysteries of new water is what he calls it. Weissman research has also uncovered a groundbreaking phenomenon, the creation of what he calls new water. He says, when Brown's gas is burned, the resulting steam condensed into what that is deuterium depleted, nearly zero deuterium, and astonishingly devoid of any prior memory. The new water is a blank slate, free from the environment or energetic imprints, which makes it unique, responsible for its surroundings. So that's what he was talking about with how he does it. So I don't know if that helps.
Well, what I can say is I was going to mention, when he was talking about the freezing production method, I was going to mention the fact that when we were providing solutions to Fukushima for dealing with their 1.45, I think now, million tons of tritiated water, one of the methods which they listed as a known method for producing concentrated tritium is to electrolyze it. And what happens is the first fraction to come out is the light water. The second fraction to come out is the deuterated water, and the third fraction is to come out is the tritiated water. And they have a whole process. It's very electrically expensive, and they run the water through increasing series of electrolysis to get the reduction of all the lighter fragments of the water. So George Weissman's observation is a known industrial process for producing light water. And I wanted Ian to say his piece. And the other way you can do it is actually straight by boiling and condensation. It's kind of the reverse of the freezing part, where the light fraction comes off, you can imagine, first. But electrolysis is a more sure way to do it if you want to actually produce a higher concentration of light water.
There's a
The
neuroscientist.
Does that have anything to do with test generators?
Uh,
Test generators do that at all?
Test generators of...
You know the Kesh plasma generators?
Oh, Kesh.
Oh, Keshi Foundation.
Keshi Foundation.
Yeah. Well, they create their GANs, and it's a material that I imagine will have latent exotic vacuum objects in there that are cohering ether energy, they actually talk about in that about how it starts to make metal superconducting, and there was I might be doing what I shouldn't do here, but I've said it before. I was talking about the Keshi Foundation. I you can go and look on my YouTube channel, or the MFMP's YouTube channel, at a presentation I did called Superconductivitis, where I talk about Keshi's work. There was a presentation that I witnessed in 2017, I think, down in Graz, about Keshi, and the observation of changes in conductivity in hydrogen-loaded constantan wire when we were doing the Celani replication. So the more hydrogen you get into the constantan wire, the lower its resistivity becomes. Okay, so this is something that's known. We demonstrated it, observed it, published it, and so I was recounting this in 2016 on June the 6th. June the 6th morning, to a rather drunk woman who works in military circles in Europe, and she says, we found out that if we put certain types of superconductor at the end of a wire, over a period of time the whole wire ends up being superconducting, which is exactly the claim that Keshi makes. So I think probably the phenomena are related. And now I've completely forgotten what your question was, or even if you had a question. You were just making a statement about Keshi.
You were talking about creating an experiment where you would ionize or use electricity to
electrolyze water,
to separate out those three different sort of phases of water: the deuterium.
Well, they're isotopics, and it's just a part. It's a known process. So, like, I mean, you could do a Google search and you'd probably find the processes that they were patented a long time ago, and they're out of patent, I believe. But this is a way of separating the fractions. But the energy amount that you need to do it, because you can't just do it in one cycle. You have to do it repeated cycles to get, because what happened was we made a proposal where, like, Amarza made a proposal where he was using his vibrators, and the vibrators are producing cavitation, and cavitation is producing the strange radiation. The strange radiation is causing the forced beta decay of the tritium. Okay. And he found that this works, and within about a 2-week period, he can do 1 half-life using his basic 179 hertz vibrators. And the idea was you just dumped these large vibrators, which are just very easy to maintain, into the top of these tritium tanks, and they could all have been remediated by now. if because he demonstrated this back in 2013 or whatever, it was 2011 that was it Christmas Eve? Was it New Year's Eve or something? I don't know. It was late 2011, I think, or something. Anyway, he demonstrated that. The process I was proposing was to electrolyze the water and run it at the glancing angle as we'd done with amasa gas over using an amasa gas electrolyzer, and run it over calcium carbonate bought from a very large mountain in Vietnam. And this would take a particular isotope of calcium and produce potassium 39 and helium, and a large amount of energy, and the energy could then be used to produce the power to drive the electrolysis. There should be a net energy gain of quite a substantial amount, and so the logic kind of added up. When we did the tests, well, of course we didn't have tritiated water, which is the key, and it's the most likely reaction that would occur. But with ordinary water, we were forming silicon, and we were also potentially explaining limelight, and limelight is something that was invented in the 1830s, and so it turns out that they changed the rules because they said we don't want to make the tritium extinct, we want to concentrate it or dump it in sea. So basically it was, if we can't have it, no one's going to have it. And so then Nine Sigma and were then kicked from the bidding process, and then the new people, Mitsubishi Industrial, are on the bidding process now, and they have a big sign on their website saying, "We will not accept bribes." So the implication is that the previous evaluators were accepting bribes for solutions to be considered, and ours was completely solving the problem that they said they had, but they didn't want to solve the problem because tritium is one of the most valuable isotopes on Earth because you can make nuclear bombs from it, thermonuclear fusion bombs, and like it decays after 10 years, so you can need to keep having a supply. Yeah.
And then back to your original question about hydrogen in biological systems. If you haven't looked at Dr. Jack Cruz, he's an interesting resource. He's been on a lot of podcasts. He's a neurosurgeon. Yeah, you know about him. Okay, I figured you would have.
Could you throw a link into the chat, because the chat is being shown on the record session on YouTube as well. And I actually didn't start record on this, so that if you want a recording of this later, you've got to look at the YouTube streams. It's just lucky I did that. Otherwise, this would be one into the ether and never to be seen again. Okay, so did you spot any comments on YouTube, Charles?
Again, everyone's just been remarkably positive. There's lots of chat going on about various different projects. People talking about graphene and water, but yeah, everyone just seems to be pretty happy. I haven't come across any glaring questions. If I missed some, please type them up. But
thanks, Diadem. Okay, so it's 17 past midnight here. Has anyone else got something that they feel they need to say, or?
One question's just come in from Larry Reed. Larry Reed question. Yes, it's not from Larry Reed, it's from Nathaniel Hawks. It's the Larry Reed question. Are you familiar with Larry Reed toroidal electron model? What type of destructed zone two-phase oscillators in hydrodynamics looks like a two-tor system with an almond in the middle?
No, I'm not.
Nope.
Okay. Send a link in a place that I can see it, and I'll have a look at it. But not until I've done the stuff that I need to do for Charles.
Larry Reed book.
Oh, there we go.
Larry Reed book, worth reading. It's a very good textbook.
Oh, there we go. There's that the thing that they're talking about.
Well, it's just a full-on sort of broad spectrum Larry Reed stuff. He's a former, I think, Lockheed Martin engineer, but he's a very good quantum physicist. Worth reading.
One would hope so. Thank you very much.
I think I have that book and it's just arrived. I just haven't read it yet. I'm just looking for it right now.
All right. So if no one else has got anything to say, then I'll close it out. So Charles, in summary.
In summary, we're doing really well. We're cooking with charcoal. I'm going to make sure that no one rocks the boat, and we're just going to keep pushing forward in a relentless fashion and make sure that this technology gets out there.
Sweet. Everyone on YouTube, thank you very much. Everyone that participated in the call, particularly great contributions from Diadon, Rupert, Ian, and Karen. Thank you very much. Paul, you've been a bit quiet, but I think you've got some people you should work with.
I hear you.
All right. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the next call, which will be when?
You and I will sort that out, Bob, next time we have a chat, which will probably be sometime this week, mate.
All right. Cheers, Charles. I'll catch you later. Thanks,
See you later.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.